Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this 10th day of March 2022. Well, of course, the weather mostly sunny, but a little bit of cloud hanging around as well right here in Brisbane, and the temperature is a comfortable 25 degrees. I say comfortable because that's comfortable for me. It is a very, very good time of the year. Of course, we have just passed through the floods. And of course, we know that lots of functions and events have started taking place once again. And heads off to all the people who have been organizing, because it takes a lot of pre-planning and you don't know what might be around the corner. So there's a lot that goes into planning all these functions and events that have all started taking place once again. And today we have quite a bit to get through, and then we have the Daily India report with Himanshu coming up as well. But first of all, Barnaby Joyce, he speaks on the government's flood response, and let's see what his thoughts are.
Barnaby Joyce is the Deputy Prime Minister. Thank you for your time. Why wasn't a national emergency declared days ago?
Well, the process that we've been going through, the Expenditure Review Committee, even having the Prime Minister there, I think this is all important. Now, obviously, in the future, you can always look back and say, I would have done things differently, but we've got to make sure that as we go through this disaster, that we look to the future, and it's been declared now. This allows us to get through the bureaucratic process a lot quicker. I do think at the start...
Sorry, can I just interrupt? Sure. I mean, firstly, do you think people on the ground really care about whether the Prime Minister's there or not? And what you've said so far doesn't really answer why this couldn't have been declared a national emergency. It was obvious, surely, a couple of weeks ago that that's what it was.
Well, I know the people on the ground would be incredibly upset. They'd be very angry. They'd be frightened. They'd be very apprehensive about the future. A national emergency, one of the biggest parts of it is to get through the bureaucratic process in a more efficient way. The resources, of course, have been going into these areas, but to get through the bureaucratic process, as the bureaucratic process becomes more pronounced in what we have to do as we go forward, then I think that it's going to assist us a lot from here. I grant that if people say, well, it should have happened last week, well, if we made that mistake, we made that mistake, and we're sorry for it. But to get through the role of government in a more efficient and expedient way, that process is now in place.
But on this question of efficiency, the Royal Commission into the Black Saturday bushfires heard that as a result of what was learned from that disaster, Commonwealth emergency response in future would kick in before a disaster became more severe, and that there would be a more coherent, preemptive and expeditious mobilisation of federal resources. And that's not what happened here.
Well, we said, like the payments in Cat A and Cat B, Category A and Category B payments, $1,000 for adults, $400 for children, that has been announced. The process of evacuation and assistance by the ADF, that was in place. Making sure that we get issues such as transport corridors open up as quickly as possible, that is in place. Evacuation processes and getting people into hospitals as required in other areas. These processes, it wasn't as if there was no process in place. And in any disaster, we acknowledge that if there are areas where you can do it better in the future, you do. Nothing is perfect. There is the whole purpose of government is to do the best job, and if you have an area where you can improve in the future, then that's what you do. You learn from these things. It's an incredibly dynamic and desperate situation, and how you deal with it is as best you can in the circumstances.
The Prime Minister's announced additional disaster relief payments. Residents of Ballina and Byron can't access them, and they're in a federal Labor seat, but people in the neighbouring National seat, which takes in Lismore, do get the extra. How do you figure that?
Well, I don't think for one second there's some form of parochialism where payments are being withheld from places because of the way the electorate votes. I think,
but how do you explain it?
I know the inference behind that, and it's wrong. We make sure we look after all Australians in equivalence form. Obviously, Lismore is, from media reports alone, has been an epicentre not just for the area but for the nation in its effect. So I would not be surprised if there was an immediate concentration on the city of Lismore, because it has been seen by not only just the area but by the nation as the epicentre, almost the ugly icon of in what the flood did.
Sure, but we all know that
the devastation of this flood.
Sure, but we all also know that, say, Ballina was badly affected. If you take the example of Ballina Hospital, which was evacuated, that area because of flooding, it's not covered because it's in the Labor seat. Other parts of Ballina that fall into the National Party seat are covered.
Well, I just completely disagree that areas are not covered because of the Labor seats. In fact, I find it really noxious that people would infer that a Labor person would not look after a national seat, or Nationals would not look after a Labor seat. We don't work like that.
Management and things of that nature. These are responsibilities of local authorities and the state government. So I think the question I could equally put to you: why haven't they funded them? Why do state governments constantly come to the federal government to pay for things that are responsibilities of state governments?
Do you understand the frustration of people out there who might be listening to this press conference, and all they've heard, and going to the pandemic as well, is governments blaming each other about whose responsibility is what?
No, I think that's a dialogue that has been focused on by others. But the truth is, you raised the pandemic. We've worked very closely together in the pandemic. We have the strongest economy in the advanced world. We have had higher jobs growth and higher economic growth than any of the G7 countries over the last 2 years. We've got one of the highest rates of vaccination anywhere in the world, and we've got one of the lowest death rates from COVID in the country, in the world. So I would say that that's a trifecta of achievement for all governments across this country. And so while some may want to focus on the odd disagreements, the actual results, as they say, if you look at the scoreboard says we've saved 40,000 lives together. The scoreboard says that we've got 250,000 more jobs than we did before the pandemic. The scoreboard says that we have one of the highest vaccination rates. It's around 95% double dose vaccination of the population aged over 16. That says that the cooperation actually does take place. And if there was more focus on the cooperation that's occurring, just like the cooperation we've seen here in Queensland right now in dealing with these flood responses. I mean, particularly with Premier Palaszczuk and specifically more recently with the event in Brisbane with Mayor Schwinner. We have worked closely together, and the flood response here in southeast Queensland, I want to thank everybody for, as I started this media conference today. We have worked closely together, and that's what Australians do want to see. And that's what's happening. Despite the odd report of a disagreement here or there, I can tell you that is not the overwhelming experience of governments working together. We're focused on the cooperation, not the differences. Thank you very much.
Your reaction to the Ukrainian maternity hospital being built?
Ladies and gentlemen, sorry to cut into that news there, because that was just breaking news coming across with the Prime Minister, who is here in Brisbane. So that was the press conference that he held at the Army Barracks. So right now, let's get on with the news. And the next news we have is that in the first one, when we heard about Barnaby Joyce saying why the emergency wasn't declared earlier. So there are protocols that government need to follow, but here is the report when Prime Minister has officially declared it an emergency.
More than 35,000 people were told to evacuate their homes across New South Wales during the last week as torrential rain hit Australia's east coast. Last night, the SES made 91 flood rescues and called this weather event unprecedented. This was Mackellar Girls' School in Manly Vale yesterday.
I was feeling just so incredibly stressed. It was above people's necks.
Sydney has received more than half a year's rainfall since January. This graph shows just how full dams are in Greater Sydney. Flood warnings are still in place for the Hunter and Hawkesbury regions. The Prime Minister visited flood-affected areas in Lismore for the first time today, but he was accused of carefully stage managing his visit.
There is no flood event that has occurred in this part of Australia like this in anyone's living or recorded memory. And that is a profound statement.
Your tour of the farm this morning, why was the media banned? No cameras for that.
Out of respect for the privacy of those I was speaking with. I came to speak with them. And you know, in disasters like this, not everybody wants a camera shoved in their face.
Who should people blame when the vast majority of rescues carried out on that Monday were carried out by private citizens in private vessels? Some of them were even on kayaks, and if they had not been there, hundreds of people would have died. So who do those people blame?
What I'm going to do is thank those. This is about thanking those who, in the midst of that disaster, were able to be first on the scene. I think we have to be realistic that in any natural disaster, we don't have those resources which has ADF just waiting around the corner.
The Prime Minister declared a national emergency, giving the government more power to deploy resources and give extra payments.
I don't think in situations like this there can ever be enough support. There can never be enough support in a natural disaster such as this. I mean, no amount of support is going to measure up to what people need in a desperate situation like this. I'm just being honest with you.
Craig Newby owns the Lismore skating rink. A house hit his business.
The flood has gone so high that it's taken this house here, that you can see it's over there. It's actually come straight through from 2 streets over, through this gap here. It's hit the power pole there, but it's just completely flattened this side of the building. I actually kayaked in when the water was still about waist high, and it was just seeing all the damage. We've bounced back from big floods before, and it's just a lot of cleaning, whereas this one has it's now caused so much damage that it's going to be a lot longer for us to get back in action.
Lismore City Councillor Ellie Bird says structural engineers are urgently needed.
People have nowhere to go. They need to get their houses assessed professionally in order to be able to determine the pathway forward with those buildings. The federal government should be mobilising the army in greater numbers to help clear the waste faster. So they're the ones with big machinery. They can get through and clear that waste.
Lismore antique store owner Dave Manby has lost his livelihood.
The inside of the building became a washing machine. We had huge, heavy antique pieces of furniture which were in the back of the shop. Our shop is 35 metres long, that ended up in the front, and stuff that was in the front ended up at the back. And we need help now. We need lots of help. And then we need ongoing help, not when all the cameras have left.
Across New South Wales, more than 1,600 soldiers are helping on the ground. That's expected to almost double by the end of today. More rain is expected later this week, but nothing like what we've seen in the last 72 hours.
Devastating news there, and you can see those footage, that is just amazing, that a whole building would, just being washed away with the flood and coming and hitting other buildings in there as well. The extent of it, as the Prime Minister said, the level which has never ever been seen before. So these are some extraordinary scenes. What about how's the roads taking all this? So as you can see, many parts there are roads just closed, part of the roads just being washed away. So this is unprecedented rain, like they said, 6 months rain in just over a short span of period. And now for our next report, we'll go to Northern Territory, where the police are investigating that matter.
In the Central Desert, 3 shots ring out in the night.
He was stabbing me, he was stabbing you.
An attempt to arrest a young Aboriginal man ends with his death. For years, the details of what happened inside this house on the 9th of November 2019 were closely guarded.
3 gunshot wounds.
But over the past 5 weeks, they've been laid bare in one of the Northern Territory's most highly charged criminal trials.
There's been outrage from Sydney to the top end after a 19-year-old was shot dead by police.
A key part of that probe is expected to be footage from the body-worn cameras
taken through the shooting of Kumanjai Walker frame by frame.
NT police officer Zachary Rolfe stands accused of murdering 19-year-old Kumanjai Walker in the Walpuri community of Yuendumu. Constable Rolfe has pleaded not guilty to murder and 2 alternative charges.
This is a murder trial, and so at its base what the prosecution needs to prove is that Constable Zachary Rolfe acted beyond, he used force beyond what was reasonable, and he acted with an intention to kill Kumanjai Walker.
Police body-worn cameras have given the jury a harrowing glimpse of how events unfolded. This footage, captured 3 days before the fatal shooting, shows an earlier attempt by 2 local officers to arrest Kumanjai Walker for breaching a court order.
Turn around now. Up at the way. No, don't turn around. No, talk to Lottie. No, you turn around. After we handcuff you.
The 19-year-old brandishes an axe towards the officers and then flees. Later that day, police returned to the home to speak to Mr. Walker's family and deliver a warning.
So, this next time he does that, he might get shot. In Alice Springs, like community policemen are different to town policemen.
3 days later, after watching footage of the so-called axe incident multiple times, Zachary Rolfe is deployed to Yuendumu along with 4 other Alice Springs officers. As night falls, Constable Rolfe and his partner, Adam Eberl, enter a house where they encounter Kumanjai Walker, who initially gives them a false name.
Hey mate, what's your name? Stop mate, we're just asking you a question. No need to keep walking. Vernon. Vernon who? Fix it.
When police try to arrest the teenager, a struggle ensues. The court hearing, Rolfe was stabbed in the shoulder with a pair of scissors. The constable draws his gun, firing once, then twice more.
Give me your arm, give me your arm. Did you? It's all good, he was stabbing me. He was stabbing me. Okay, Bryce. It's all good. He's got scissors in his hand. He was stabbing me, he was stabbing you. All right, Bryce.
The Crown prosecutor argues that while the first shot was legally justified, the second and third were not. He says in the 2.6 seconds between the first and second shots, the situation had changed, and Mr. Walker had been effectively restrained by Constable Rolfe's partner. A month into the trial, Zachary Rolfe took the stand to give his account of what happened in those crucial moments.
So he's been silent for 2 years and 2 months. And then on day 15, day 16 of the trial, he stands up to give evidence.
The 30-year-old told the court that before the first shot was fired, Mr. Walker had reached for his Glock. As the struggle moved to the mattress, he said he saw Mr. Walker stabbing his fellow officer in the chest and acted in accordance with his training out of fear for his partner's life.
Why did you take the course of shooting Kumanjai Walker again, rather than intervening physically?
Well, I believe there was still an immediate threat to Eberl's life, and my training states that I should not go hands-on with someone with an edged weapon, unless I cannot use my firearm. That's how I was trained.
Under cross-examination, Crown Prosecutor Philip Strickland asked the constable if he was fixated on Kumanjai Walker and accused him of lying about seeing the teenager reaching for his Glock and stabbing his partner.
You did not believe, did you, that you needed to fire the second and third shots to protect Eberl's life?
I believe I needed to fire shots 2 and 3 to protect Eberl's life.
And you've made that evidence up to justify the fatal shooting of Kumanjai Walker.
Incorrect.
The prosecution's case is that Zachary Rolfe had a mission, and that mission was one-eyed, in that he had an intention to arrest Walker, and he had an intention, if there was any resistance, to use extreme force. The defence's argument is that Zachary Rolfe is a man that's serving his community. He brought a violent offender down and saved 2 policemen, including himself, from serious harm.
It's now up to members of the jury to decide which version of events they will accept.
And a hard decision for the jury there. Well, of course, the law and justice and must prevail. So it is a system that's going through some very disturbing footage there as well, in that very, very unfortunate incident. But, in line of duty, on call, on the occasion, in those crucial moments, how you act, that it is very, very hard. Well, right now, I'm just also mindful of the time, so we will just quickly go and have a look at the crisis in Ukraine.
Nothing else but devastating. City officials in the city of Mariupol in Ukraine's southeast say a maternity and children's hospital has been hit by several Russian airstrikes. They say it's been destroyed, and they've described the damage as colossal. Video has been posted online, and it shows a horrific scene. Piles of smouldering rubble, smashed cars, holes where windows used to be in a building that we're told was that maternity and children's hospital. Now, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has tweeted describing this attack as an atrocity. He says there are children and they're trapped under the wreckage. Now this attack happened during what was supposed to be a ceasefire, allowing civilians to escape from that city, but yet again that ceasefire has been broken. Mariupol is a port city. It's of great strategic value to Russia, and it's encircled by Russian troops. There's an enormous humanitarian crisis unfolding in this city. The carnage there is unimaginable. Tens of thousands of civilians are trapped in the city. They've been trapped by days and days of Russian bombings. They have no food, no power, no water. Locals say the streets are lined with bodies, and there are reports of mass graves in that city. The Red Cross has described the conditions as apocalyptic. I think you can't use words to describe the crisis that's unfolding there. It's really unimaginable. Tens of thousands of lives are on the line right now, and days of attempted ceasefires to allow them to escape have failed.
And Sean, we're seeing some really horrific pictures as you are speaking to us this morning. The international reaction to this has been swift. What have other world leaders had to say about this attack?
Well, Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson tweeted soon after the attack. I'm going to read it to you. He said, "There are few things more depraved than targeting the vulnerable and defenceless." He says the UK is now exploring more support for Ukraine to defend itself against airstrikes, and he's vowed the UK will hold Russia's President Vladimir Putin to account for what he described as his terrible crimes. Now, the Kremlin has also commented on these reports, saying that Russian forces do not fire on civilian targets. Russia has repeatedly denied that it is firing on civilian targets, even though, as I said, report after report is emerging from residents in that town, from civilians, of carnage, of bodies in the streets and of mass graves, James. Nothing else but devastating. City officials in the city of Mariupol in Ukraine's southeast say a maternity and children's hospital has been hit by several Russian airstrikes.
And of course, that is again a very, very devastating news. Russian troops and Russian authorities are saying that they do not bomb civilian sites. So, and here is the things. But once again, where did the bomb come from? Who shot that? That's another. Well, it is very, very devastating news there, and we hope that they reach some kind of agreement as soon as they can, because it is such a big controversy and leading into a very big conflict, which could involve other countries, and that would be disastrous. All right, now it's time to go to our daily India report.
Welcome to Daily India Report that brings you glimpses of the changing India. In our first story, leaders of India and the European Union held the inaugural India-EU consultations on Africa in virtual mode. Leaders of India and the European Union held the inaugural India-EU consultations on Africa on 7th March. The meeting was held in virtual mode according to India's Ministry of External Affairs. This meeting follows discussions during the India-EU Leaders Summit held in May 2021. The consultations were co-chaired by Puneet R. Kundal, Joint Secretary MEA from the Indian side, and Bernard Quentin, Deputy Managing Director for Africa, European External Action Service from the EU side. Recalling their wide-ranging partnership with Africa, both sides discussed areas of mutual interest and explored opportunities for further collaboration and consultation. Both sides agreed to further strengthen their cooperation in the region and to continue the discussions periodically. Indian Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman says she is concerned about the impact on economy of rising crude prices due to the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Indian Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman expressed concern over rising crude prices due to the Ukraine-Russia conflict and indicated that the Union government is looking to tap alternative sources. At an interactive session organized by BJP's Karnataka unit, she said the conflict and rising crude prices will certainly have an impact on the Indian economy. India imports more than 85% of its crude oil requirements. She added that when oil prices go up, it is a matter of concern, and now we will have to see how it pans out. She also pointed out that oil marketing companies fix pump prices based on the 15-day average. The government of India is watching to see if there are alternative sources from where it can get crude. Russia is one of the world's largest suppliers of natural gas and crude, and investors are now fretting about potential supply disruptions. For the time being, Western governments have not included Russian oil in their wide-ranging sanctions on Moscow, owing to concerns about the price impact on consumers. But the United States and allies are negotiating among themselves about banning crude imports from Russia. This sent benchmark Brent oil prices surging to a near 14-year high of $139.13 per barrel on March 7th. Not far from its 2008 record pinnacle of $147.50. Continuing its rise on March 8th, Brent surged past $126 a barrel as fears of formal sanctions against Russian oil and fuel exports spurred concerns about supply. However, Germany, the biggest buyer of Russian crude oil, has rejected plans for an energy embargo. Replacing the vast quantities of Russian fuel and oil in the market may raise supply concerns among oil traders, prompting a surge in prices. Imports of Russian crude have not been put under sanctions, but if it is done, the United States would be left alone, without the participation of allies in Europe, as they depend on Russia for natural gas and crude. Russia warned it could stop the flow of natural gas through pipelines from Russia to Germany in response to Berlin's decision last month to halt the opening of the controversial new Nord Stream 2 pipeline. If all of Russia's oil exports were blocked from global markets, analysts believe the prices could rise to $200 a barrel. Russia's Deputy Prime Minister said oil prices could soar to more than $300. European and South Korean automakers will divert semiconductor chips meant for the Russian market to India. This will ensure speedy delivery for those awaiting deliveries. The Indian units of European and South Korean automakers may unwittingly become beneficiaries of the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. Amid a semiconductor shortage worldwide, the decision of European automakers to stop production in Russia, a 1.5 million unit automobile market, would mean chips meant for Russia possibly getting diverted to other growing global markets, such as India, according to industry experts. The beneficiaries could be the Indian units of Kia, Hyundai Motor, Skoda, Volkswagen, Renault and luxury car makers such as Mercedes-Benz. That would be good news for Indian buyers who are waiting to get the delivery of their cars and SUVs, some of which have a waiting period of up to 10 months due to the shortage of semiconductors, a critical component in modern vehicles. In fact, they have been forced to slash production. The production disruption amid strong demand for cars and SUVs had caused an estimated revenue loss of around $5 billion for the manufacturers in India last year. For Skoda, Russia is the second largest market after Germany and bigger than the home market of the Czech Republic, while for Kia and Renault, it is among the top three. This means a sizable chip availability may be diverted to emerging markets. India may get precedence if they redistribute the chips, since this is also a global launch market for some of their vehicles. A senior executive at an East Asia headquartered company speaking on the condition of anonymity said chip allocation to India could be increased on rising uncertainty of production in Russia. The diversion of chips to markets having visibility of superior margin and volume would be a logical step and an optimal solution to protect financial performance at the parent level. Korea's Kia and Hyundai could be the biggest beneficiaries if the allocation is increased to India, owing to their large market share in SUVs, the fastest growing passenger vehicle segment in India. Kia was projecting sales of 241,000 units or 7.5% of its global volume in Russia in 2022. According to an investor presentation in India, its forecast for this year is 243,000 units. 3 out of Kia's 4 models in India have a waiting period of 40 to 60 weeks due to the chip shortage, so getting extra supplies will definitely help. Hyundai has projected a wholesale number of 214,000 in Russia in 2022. Russia accounts for nearly 5% of the global volume of Korean car makers. In India, where Hyundai sold 515,000 units in 2021, its top-selling model Creta has a waiting period of 10 months. India announced that regular international flight operations will resume from March 27th after 2 years. India will resume regular international flight operations from March 27th, 2 years after the sector was shut due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Union Ministry of Civil Aviation said that the international operations, however, will be subject to strict adherence to the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare guidelines for international travel as amended from time to time. Air bubble arrangements are the temporary arrangements between the two countries to resume commercial passenger services when regular international flights were suspended due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In order to prevent the spread of COVID-19, the Aviation Watchdog, Directorate General of Civil Aviation, suspended operations of scheduled international commercial passenger services to and from India with effect from March 23, 2020. Indian Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal said India was looking to advance a comprehensive economic partnership agreement with Bangladesh. India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal said the government wanted to move forward with a comprehensive economic partnership agreement with Bangladesh and called for greater cooperation between the two countries in areas such as defense and pharmaceuticals production. Bangladesh is India's 5th largest export destination. Addressing the inaugural session of the India-Bangladesh Stakeholders Meet, Piyush Goyal said improving this connectivity further was imperative for the expansion of the bilateral trade and realization of the investment potential of Bangladesh and Eastern India. Both countries should also explore potential areas of investments in textiles, jute products, leather and footwear, APIs for pharmaceuticals, medical equipment, agribusiness, among others, he said. The minister emphasized the need to give more impetus to the joint production of defense equipment. The defense cooperation has not progressed, though India offered a $500 million line of credit. The time has come to take it to the next level so that both countries can also look at joint manufacturing of vaccines and other medicines. Bollywood fans of action drama flicks are in for a treat. The trailer of Attack has been released. It stars John Abraham, Rakul Preet, Jacqueline Fernandez, Ratna Pathak Shah and Prakash Raj in pivotal roles. The film is all set to release in theatres on 1st April 2022. The action thriller film Attack is helmed by Lakshya Raj Anand. Part 1 of Attack is a big-ticket franchise based on a world where future wars will be fought on technology and artificial intelligence. For the first time in Indian cinemas, Bollywood actor John Abraham is redefining action films with an all-new avatar of a super soldier in his highly anticipated next Attack. The film, which is all set to release in cinemas on April 1st, 2022, also stars Jacqueline Fernandez and Rakul Preet Singh in lead roles. The Force actor took to Twitter to share the trailer of his much-anticipated flick. The 1-minute 38-second trailer sees Jacqueline and John living together as one happy couple. A dedicated soldier, John is seen performing high-octane action sequences. He is transformed into a super soldier by scientists to fight the menacing and violent characters of society. The trailer ends with Rakul Preet announcing that John's energy levels are going low as they track him via a machine. The clip ends with John yearning for his breath. The trailer ends in anger following the announcement of the release date of the first part of Attack. The film also stars Prakash Raj and Ratna Pathak Shah as they combine their forces to bring the audience's special adrenaline-pumping action entertainer experience. That's all for this bulletin of Daily India Report.
And thank you very much, Himanshu, for that report, Daily India Report, produced by PIOTB exclusively for Australian Indian Radio. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's about all we have time for you today. And as we know that some of the functions and events have now started taking place. But once again, if you are going to these functions and events, it is always advisable that you check with the organizers about what changes there might be or under what conditions you would be allowed to enter, meaning that you might have to show your the COVID-19 passes and things like that. So always, advisable to check. But before we go, let's have a look at some of the functions and events taking place. And ladies and gentlemen, that's about all we have time for you in this segment. It's been wonderful having your company. The temperature now is once again 25 degrees, mostly cloudy. And of course, it is the season of the rains and everything, so always be careful as well. I know if you're dealing with all your insurance details, please make sure you have all your documents together, and lots of photographs and photographic evidence is what they're looking for. And I know there are many people who are just struggling and getting through all of those things, and the big clean out. And as we know, Prime Minister is in town and making an announcement. He was at the Army Barracks this morning, and at the beginning of today's clip, we showed you the live coverage from there as well. And if you have any topic that you'd like to discuss, if there's any issues that you'd like to bring to the forefront, we'd like to welcome you. You can join us on the show via a video link, or if you are able to, you can come and join us here in the studio. We'd love to have you. We'd like to hear from you. We'd like to hear the perspectives of all different people, because this is your show, and we'd want it to feature things that really matter to you. As we know, yesterday the federal minister was here, and we did have a chance to talk to him. And once the recordings is made available, we will present that as well. That was the Minister Zed Saselja, the Minister for International Affairs and the Pacific. So, it was good to meet him together with Senator Paul Scar and our great friend Zach, and everyone knows Zach, the wonderful work that he does out there in bringing the communities together, and as a great advocate of community unity. So, ladies and gentlemen, until tomorrow, it's goodbye from me.